The target grammar for this lecture is do so. Do so is a really good grammar structure for making us sound more fluent. Let's have a look at the meaning for do so. Look at these two example sentences. The first one reads, "My friend asked me to help her move house, and I was happy to help her move house." Notice that this sentence sounds a bit repetitive because we've repeated a phrase, help her move house. We said it in the previous clause, and we said it again in the second clause. To avoid this repetition, we can simply use do so. Look at the second example. My friend asked me to help her move house, and I was happy to do so. Do so simply replaces the verb phrase that you want to repeat. The second example sounds much more fluent and much more natural. Here is the meaning in detail. So we have the example at the top. My friend asked me to help her move house, and I was happy to do so. Do so replaces a previous verb phrase. Instead of repeating the same verb phrase, simply use do so. In this example, the verb phrase that is replaced by do so is help her move house. Can you see how useful do so is? Instead of repeating a verb phrase, which some people do, just use do so. It makes you sound much more fluent and less repetitive, so you're not repeating the same words again. Simply use do so. It sounds much nicer and much more fluent. Have a look at these few examples that we're going to go through now. Here's the first one. The boss has agreed to raise my salary. He will do so in the new financial year. I'd like you to think about this sentence. Which phrase do you think do so is replacing in the previous sentence? Have a think. It's replacing the phrase raise my salary. Raise is the verb, and the verb phrase includes the words that follow it. So raise my salary is the verb phrase we're replacing. We could say, if we were being repetitive, the boss has agreed to raise my salary. He will raise my salary in the new financial year. But this sounds very repetitive, so instead we simply used do so to replace the verb phrase. Have a look at this longer example. Manchester United have reached the cup final again and will try to retain the cup for the third year in a row. Their chances of doing so are very high. Again, have a moment, pause the video and think which verb phrase is doing so replacing here. The verb phrase that's being replaced is retain the cup for the third year in a row. This is quite a long verb phrase, so doing so is perfect because we don't want to repeat this very long phrase. Imagine I said, their chances of retaining the cup for the third year in a row are very high. If I said that again, it would sound very, very strange and very repetitive. So doing so again is absolutely perfect here. Notice in this example that I changed the form of do so to doing so. I used an ing form. Do so changes just like any other verb. So we can change the tense to suit the sentence. Think about the different forms of the verb do. We can use did, the past tense, does, the present simple, doing, had done, etc. So we say do so, did so, doing so, and so on. We'll go through this more in the next lecture, the structure. Now look at this last example. Put your hands up, shouted the bank robber. As everyone did so, he took the bag of money and escaped. Have a think again. Which verb phrase is did so replacing? It's replacing the verb phrase put your hands up. Now there is another verb phrase just after put your hands up. The verb phrase shouted the bank robber. But from the context of the sentence, we know that is not the verb phrase that we want to replace. It's obvious from the context that we wish to replace the verb phrase put your hands up. If we add that to the sentence, it makes sense. We could say, as everyone put their hands up, he took the bag of money and escaped. Notice in this example that we didn't replace the most recent verb phrase next to do so. It was not the most recent, but the one before. So context is important when it comes to using this grammar structure. The person, the listener or the reader, needs to understand which words you are replacing. So make sure you don't use do so to replace words that you used 5 minutes ago, because the listener will have no idea what you're replacing. It needs to be quite recent, so perhaps 2 or 3 verb phrases in the past is enough. Don't go more than that. Most commonly, we replace the most recent verb phrase used. Sometimes we can go back 2 or 3 if the context makes it clear. This is always important. Now move on to the structure lecture. See you there.